Aloha and welcome to this experience called 5 Problems Every Software Engineer Should Be Able to Solve, Part 1. Um, this is named this way because there was this blog posting by this interviewer who said, here's 5 problems that every software engineer should be able to solve in less than an hour. I agree with him. On the other hand, if I created a practice WOD that takes an hour to do, that is a little problematic, right, in terms of repeating it and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do the first of the 5 problems. But instead of solving it at a whiteboard, we're going to actually use this as an opportunity to integrate all of the stuff we've been playing around with so far. So I think this is a good experience for you in terms of getting your chops together about using IntelliJ, GitHub, _ESLint, everything at the same time. Okay, so let's try this. We're going to start the timer, and then we're going to create an empty GitHub repo called sum of numbers, because that's actually what we're going to solve. This is sum up some numbers, which is pretty trivial. So let's go to GitHub, and we'll click for a new repository, and we'll say sum of numbers, and it'll be public, and we'll want a README file. And then we'll say create repo. Now we've got this one, and then we'll say open in desktop. So that will basically result in it being cloned, and I like to have a GitHub directory with a subdirectory for the organization that these repos are in. This is my personal one, and then I'm going to have sum of numbers inside there. So I'll say clone, and now I've got a local copy of that repo directory that I can play around with. And the way I'm going to play around with it is to create an IntelliJ project called sum of numbers within that directory. So I'll go to IntelliJ, I'll say create new project, static web, and then the directory that I'm going to do it is in, actually cancel, let's just type it in, sum of numbers, and then we'll say finish. And then, fortunately, it creates it in my other display here, so I'll move it down to here. So now I've got this sum of numbers inside my GitHub repo. Okay, so now we want to set the project to use our JavaScript coding standards. You remember this page that goes through it in detail. I've created a little checklist here that makes it easier to just whiz through and make sure they're all good. So we'll start by looking at preferences, editor, code style. Oh, and then yes, it's asking me if I want to add files to Git every time I add a new file here, and that's a good thing to do. So I'm going to say OK and remember that. So if we go to preferences, editor, code style, I can see I am using the ICS template. That's the first one. Second one is to disable the JavaScript inspections, preferences, editor inspections. So I'll go to preferences, editor, inspections, go down to JavaScript and click it till it's blank, then say OK. That'll disable those for this project. I'm going to enable ECMAScript 6 as our variant of the JavaScript languages and preferences, languages, and frameworks. So I go to preferences, languages and frameworks, JavaScript, and then go to the default, or make the default ECMAScript 6. I'm going to enable ESLint, languages and frameworks, JavaScript code quality tools. So preferences, JavaScript code quality tools, ESLint, enable. Click OK, and then download the sample ESLint. So we've got to tell ESLint what we actually want it to do. So I find the fastest way to do this is to save just the sample.eslint into the directory where I'm doing stuff, and then I go back into IntelliJ, and then I see that, and I can do a Shift F6 to rename it, and now it's the .eslint.rc file. There may be other ways to do it. That's the way I've found to be I mean, there are other ways to do it for sure, but that's the way I found is fastest. Okay, so now we've created, we've set things up in 4 minutes. So we're going to create an index.html and a sum of numbers.js. Index should load sum of numbers.js as well as the underscore package. So let's go back here. And we'll click on that. I'll do a propeller n, file, JavaScript, sum of numbers.js to create that file. And then I'll click on the project directory, propeller n for new one, F for file, up one to get to HTML, and then I'll do index.html. Now I've got my index.html, and I want to load the underscore script. So I'll load that. Heads up that you should probably load that underscore script before you load your JavaScript, so that underscore is defined before the JavaScript engine encounters your actual program. So we'll say sum of numbers.js. That's what we're going to do, and then I'll do a right angle and it completes. So there's our index.html. It's going to load underscore. It's going to load this sum of numbers.js file. And we go back here. We notice there is one of these IntelliJ inspections. Unfortunately, it's complaining about the default file template. So to fix that, we just have to add a comment solving experience E26. And now we get to our green check mark, which is what we'd like to have. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to return the sum of numbers in a given list using a for loop, a while loop, recursion, and underscore. So we've got to write 4 functions all that do this kind of simple thing. So let's start with the for loop. Actually, why don't we start by creating a list of numbers, numList, or test nums. Let's call it that. Test nums equals 1, 2, 3, 4. And I want to notice that we get an ESLint error, right? Which is good, just to verify that things are working the way it is. This is because we haven't used it yet. That's okay. This is more serious. We need to have spaces after each of these things in order for our coding standard to be satisfied. Now we're going to say function sum for, and we're going to take an array of nums, and we've got to use a for loop to sum them up. So there's a variety of different ways we could do this. What I'm going to do is say let total equals 0, and then for num of nums, actually I got to say const, num of nums, total plus equal num, right? So I'm going to iterate through this list, assigning each of the elements in turn to num, which is going to be a number, and then I just increment total by that amount, and then I got to say return total. Okay, and then let's look and see what is the problem here. The problem is sum for is defined but never used. Test nums is defined but never used. So therefore, if I say console log sum for with test nums, theoretically, we should be golden. Let's see. Yes, we got the green check mark. Sometimes I have to click on that bugger to make the check mark appear. Okay, so now let's go over to index.html and actually run our code. So if I do a propeller option J to display the console, I see what my console.log statement which is 10, which is indeed the sum of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we've got our sum for function working. Okay, that's good. Now we got to do a sum while. Okay, so we have to have a while loop now. It's a little irritating because it's not really very good form to use a while loop for this. But we're just, apparently every software engineer should be able to do this, so I guess we should be able to do it. So let's say we're going to need our variable to count up our amount, and another way to do that, I guess we're just going to create a variable called I, which is going to be our index into it, and then we can say while I less than the length of the array of list of numbers that we've got, we can increment total by nums sub I, right? And then the other thing is we've got to increment our I so that we don't have an infinite loop. And then what do we do again? We return total, just like before. Okay, so that looks, okay. Some while is defined but never used, so we can copy this line and put it in there, and then say some while. Okay, and so let's click here. Still got an error? Oh, missing space before open brace. Bam. Okay, there we go. Now we've got our green check mark. Let's go back to index.html, click on this, and we've got 210. So we've got our some while loop to work the way we want. So now let's go back to our problem. Okay, the third one is recursion. Got to write a recursive loop. Function some recursion. So I'll take you back to, I don't know, 211 or something. You probably wrote this in 211 or somewhere. How are we going to do this? Well, we don't want to have a total anymore because we're going to actually compute this plus using the stack. But we do need our base condition, right? So we can say, and what I think we'll do is we'll basically splice this. We'll take this array and we'll get the first element of it and we'll add it to the result of adding up the remainder of the array. So we're going to chop off the head of the array each time. So what we can say is if we're passed in an empty array, so if nums.length equals 0, then we return 0 because obviously the number in a 0 length array is 0. Else, return, and now what we're going to do is we're going to say nums, we're going to turn the result of adding the very first element of the array to the recursive call, some recursion, where we pass in the rest of the array, and that's a slice. 1 nums.length. That's just kind of a canonical JavaScript-y type thing here. Okay, so we write that, and we notice we've got our define but never used, but then we've also got this other thing here, which says our braces style is not good, but also unnecessary else after return. So that's kind of a more interesting one. It indicates that, in fact, we don't need that else clause at all. This will work just as good. Now notice the indentation is off, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a propeller option L to reformat my buffer, and because I've set that ICS SE code style, it knows what the indentation is and it makes everything look good. Okay, so now we've got some recursion, but we're not using it, so let's just try calling some recursion with our test nums, and we've got a new line required at the end of the file, so I'll add that in, and let's click here. We've got the green check, so we'll go to index and we'll run 10 10 10. So we've done it 3 ways so far. That's good. The last way is to use underscore, and we've got a hint here, which is we're supposed to entitle this function sum the simple way. So let's go back to here, and we'll say function sum the simple way, and with nums. And it turns out, if we go to underscore, which we might want to, underscore, how do we do that? Well, the way that we do that is via reduce, right? This is a classic. We've got a list and we want to reduce it to a number. Even better, actually, is the fact that this sample code is exactly what we need to do. So, we should, I guess if we were at a whiteboard, we'd have to kind of construct this, although at a whiteboard we probably wouldn't be using underscore anyway. But since we're asked to use underscore, let's just type that in, or paste that in, and then we'll say nums, and then we'll say missing space before function parentheses. I think there's a missing space there. So let's see if it works, just for fun. So I do console.log sum the simple way. Okay. Have we got our green check mark? No, we've got some little problem here. Missing function expression name. This is an ESLint warning, not an error, but we do want to get to the green check mark. So we'll call this, I don't know, memoizer. Okay, and that gets rid of that. So now we've got our green check mark. And then we go to index.html and we run it. And look at this, we get undefined, not a number. So we didn't do this one perfectly. So let's go back and take a look here. Anybody see? Can you see what the error is? Undefined, right? The problem is we forgot to do return. Okay, so let's add the return in, go back to index.html, run this puppy again, and now we've got all 4 of these that we need. So we've got a green check mark, we saw that. Commit our finished code to GitHub. So let's go to sum of numbers, go to here so we can see all the things we've things. So finished sum of numbers, commit and sync master. And then check that our code is on GitHub. So the easiest way I know to get there is to simply right-click over this and then view on GitHub. And there indeed we have our nice little file of code right there. And 17 minutes. Let's call it 17. Not too bad. And hope that you're starting to feel more comfortable with the JavaScript coding standards.